Here are the solutions to the third quiz for Math 95. Let's see, in the first problem we're asked to find solutions to this equation here. Kind of a mess, but fortunately it looks something like the ones we've been doing this week. Our first step is we want to get rid of all the denominators, that is we want to find the least common denominator and then multiply it by both sides of the equation. And I think one step that you can do that might make it more clear is instead of thinking about this guy as 2x minus 4, if you factor out a 2, you get 2 times x minus 2. And the advantage to that form is it makes it a little bit easier. Maybe we'll even factor this out just so we can really see it. X squared minus 4, difference of squares. It's x minus 2 times x plus 2. So now that we have it written in this form, we can figure out that our least common denominator is 2 times x minus 2 times x plus 2. Right, that covers all three of these denominators here. So therefore, x cannot be equal to negative 2 or positive 2. And if x does not equal those two guys, we can multiply both sides of the equation by this least common denominator. Over here, we'll get 2 times x minus 2 times x plus 2 over x plus 2. The x plus 2's will cancel out, and we'll be left with 2 times x minus 2. Similarly, over here, the 2 and the x minus 2 will cancel out. We'll be left with 3 times x plus 2. And here, everything will cancel out, and we'll just have what we have up top here, x squared minus 10x plus 4. So now we want to be able to combine like terms. Before we can do that, we have to distribute the 2 and the 3. Distribute the 2 through, and you get 2x minus 4. Distribute the 3 through, and you get 3x plus 6. And now maybe we'll move everything to the right-hand side of the equation here, because we already got the x squared over there. Let's see, we have 3x minus 10x, so that's negative 7x. But then we subtract 2 more x over here, and get negative 9x. And then we have 6 and 4 gives us 10. But we want to subtract 4, or no, sorry, add 4 to both sides of the equation. So that gives us plus 14. And what's nice about this is it factors. We want two numbers that multiply to be positive 14 and add to be negative 9. If you think about that for a little while, mess with it, you'll get negative 2 and negative 7. So this tells us that either x equals 2 or 7. But be careful, that's not your answer. We said up here x cannot be 2. So our answer is just x equals 7. Alright, moving on to the next problem, word problem. Alright. Fortunately, we did one similar to this in class. Let's see, one day I rode 4 miles in a lake with no current, and then the next day I rode 2 miles downstream and 2 more miles upstream in a river with a current of 2 miles per hour. So let's let x be speed with no current. So then x minus 2 is our speed going against the current, and x plus 2 is our speed going with the current. If the time it took me to row in the river was 4/3 of the time that it took me to row in the lake, how fast was I rowing in the lake? Okay, so we want to figure out the time that it took me to row in the river. So let's see, in the river, my speed was, so we got distance equals rate times time. We want to know what time is, so if we divide both sides by r, we get time equals distance divided by rate. So we want to know the time, maybe time in the river. Well, let's see, the distance in the river was 2 miles with the current, so x plus 2. And then another 2 miles against the current, x minus 2. And my time in the lake was 4 miles was the distance, and the rate is just x. So let's see, we know, so that was the time in the river, and that was the time in the lake. And we know that the time in the river, this top guy, is 4/3 of this bottom guy. That is 4 over x times 4/3 has to equal 2 over x plus 2 plus 2 over x minus 2. So I think the hardest part is getting to this equation right here, but if you get to this equation right here, we can just solve it in the same way we solved the first problem. Maybe it's worth simplifying just a little bit before we do that. On the left-hand side here, we can call this 16 over 3x. If we leave these guys alone, we figure out that our least common denominator is 3x times x plus 2 times x minus 2. And once we know the least common denominator, we can multiply both sides of the equation by it. So what we get is 16 times all this mess divided by 3x. But the 3x's will cancel out, so we'll get 16 times x plus 2 times x minus 2 is equal to 2 times all this mess, but the x plus 2's will cancel out. So we're left with 2 times 3x, which is 6x, times x minus 2. And then finally, 2 times all this mess divided by x minus 2. The x minus 2's will cancel out, and we'll get 6x times x plus 2, which almost fits in there. And from here, what we need to do is solve for x. So let's see, 16 x plus 2 times x minus 2 is x squared minus 4. And then over on this side, you have 6x times x is 6x squared. 6x times negative 2 is negative 12x. 6x times x is again 6x squared, and 6x times positive 2 is positive 12x. Finally, if we factor this 16 through, 16x squared minus 4 times 16, 64. And things look really bad, but here's the step where finally we can simplify a little. Let's see, we have a minus 12x over here and a plus 12x, so those just cancel out. And then what else do we have? 16x squared, 6x squared, and 6x squared. So that's 12x squared. You can subtract that from both sides. Minus 64 equals 0. 16 minus 12 is just 4x squared. Minus 64 equals 0. Kind of running out of room. I guess I could squeeze it in here. Divide by 4, and you get x squared minus 16 equals 0. Add 16 to both sides and take a square root, and you get x equals plus or minus 4. But we don't want the minus 4 because we're looking for speeds, and speeds should be positive. So how fast was I rowing in the lake? That's the thing we're calling x, is 4 miles per hour. And that's the answer and the end of the quiz.